Amelia stepped into William's office, her heartbeat loud in her ears. She barely registered the sleek, cold marble floors beneath her feet. All that mattered was the picture she was holding of a little girl with wild curls and eyes that mirrored William's own. The weight of the last 16 years pressed on her chest. She dropped the photograph on his desk. The words, raw and desperate, slipped past her lips before she could stop them. "She's yours, William." William froze. His eyes locked on the photograph, his mind struggling to process what she was saying. The room, once filled with the hum of luxury and ambition, suddenly felt small, suffocating. His empire, the one he'd spent years building with calculated precision, now felt insignificant in the face of this revelation. A daughter. He had a daughter. The tension in the air was thick. Amelia was waiting, desperately hoping that the man she had once loved could hear her, could understand the truth she'd kept hidden for so long. "Welcome back, my family. I'm truly happy to have you here again today. Thank you for your support, your kindness, and your beautiful comments. They're the reason I keep creating these stories every single day. Before we begin, I want to speak a quick blessing over everyone watching. I'm wishing you peace in your mind, strength in your spirit, and favor in everything your hands touch. May your home be filled with calm, protection, and unexpected blessings. And from my heart to yours, Merry Christmas in advance. May this season bring you healing, joy, and new beginnings. If you're watching and you haven't subscribed yet, please take a moment to do so. Your subscription, your likes, and your shares to friends and family help this channel grow and stay alive, and I would truly love for you to be part of this journey with us. Now, thank you again for being here. Let's get into today's story. Amelia's gaze shifted, and for the first time in 16 years, she allowed herself to breathe. William was staring at the photograph, his face frozen in disbelief. He hadn't said a word. The silence between them was suffocating, thick with confusion and unspoken questions. Amelia swallowed hard, her hands trembling as she prepared herself for the hardest thing she'd ever done. "I didn't want this," she whispered, her voice barely audible, the weight of her confession pulling her down. "I never wanted to bring you into this. But Bella, my daughter, she needs you." The words hung in the air like an unbearable truth that had finally broken free. William's eyes flickered from the photo to her face, his mind struggling to process the magnitude of what she was telling him. His lips parted as if he wanted to speak, but no words came out. Amelia's chest tightened as she watched him, the man who had once held her heart, now a stranger in front of her. She could see the battle in his eyes, the anger, the confusion, the betrayal. She knew what he was thinking. He hadn't asked for this. He hadn't asked for any of it. And yet, here they were. Amelia took a deep breath and forced herself to keep going. "I've been raising Bella on my own, William, for 16 years. I did it alone. But now, the state is involved. They," she hesitated, her throat tightening. "They want to take her away. They're threatening foster care. If I can't show that she's got a stable future, she'll be gone. And I—" She trailed off, fighting the rising panic in her chest. "I can't do this without you." For a moment, William was still. Then, he finally spoke, his voice low, controlled, but laced with disbelief. "You're telling me that my daughter is at risk of being taken away, and you waited until now to tell me?" His words felt like a slap, raw and unforgiving. Amelia flinched, but she didn't back down. She couldn't. Bella's future was at stake, and as much as it hurt to ask for his help, she knew it was the only way. "I didn't want to pull you into this. You're not part of this world, William. You've built your life, your empire, and I didn't want to disrupt it. I thought I could protect her alone." William stood there, staring at her, his brow furrowing as he processed her words, his jaw clenched. "So, all this time, you kept her from me. You kept her from me?" The words were sharp, cutting through the air between them. Amelia felt the sting, but she didn't flinch. She couldn't. "I was trying to protect her, William. Protect her from From the chaos of your life. From this, she gestured to the luxurious office around them, the gleaming glass and polished surfaces that represented everything he had built. I never wanted her to feel like she wasn't enough, like she didn't belong. I didn't want to be just another thing that came second to your ambition. She could see the flicker of guilt cross his face, but it was fleeting, quickly masked by his anger. And now I'm supposed to be her father? His voice was incredulous, the weight of her words hitting him hard. What am I supposed to do now, Amelia? You've kept me out of her life for 16 years, and now you want me to step in like it's nothing? His words cut deep, but Amelia didn't let herself crumble. I don't know what you're supposed to do, William, but I'm asking you to help me now, because I can't do it alone anymore. Bella needs someone who can give her the stability that I can't. Her voice shook, but she held his gaze, trying to convey just how desperate she was. She needs you. The tension in the room thickened. William's mind raced, and Amelia could see the internal struggle playing out on his face. This wasn't a decision he could make in an instant. It was a life-altering choice, one that would change everything for him, for both of them. She had known this would be hard, but she hadn't realized just how hard it would be to make him see what was at stake. Why didn't you tell me sooner? He asked, his voice quieter now, but the hurt was still there. Why didn't you trust me enough to let me in, Amelia? I could have helped you. We could have figured this out together. The question hit her like a ton of bricks. I didn't trust you, she admitted, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. I couldn't. You were always so focused on your career, your company. And she broke off, taking a shaky breath. I couldn't stand the thought of Bella growing up in a world where she'd always be second place. I couldn't stand the thought of her not knowing what it felt like to have a father who would be there. Her confession hung in the air, raw and vulnerable. She had carried that weight for so long, and now the burden of it felt unbearable. William turned away, pacing across the room, his mind working through the mess that had just been thrown at him. He stopped by the window, staring out at the city below, his reflection merging with the glass. I never thought about it like that, he muttered to himself. I didn't realize how much I missed. Amelia's heart twisted at the vulnerability in his voice, but she didn't allow herself to feel sympathy, not yet. Bella was the priority now, not William's regrets. You can't fix the past, William, she said softly, her voice steady despite the emotions swirling inside her. But you can help her now. You can help Bella, and I can't do this alone. I don't have anyone else to turn to. He turned to face her, his expression still a mix of anger and confusion, but there was something else there too, a flicker of resolve. I don't know what I'm doing, Amelia, he said, his voice quieter now, almost hesitant. But if she's mine, if I can help her, I'll do what I can. Amelia's heart skipped a beat, a spark of hope flickering inside her. You don't have to be perfect, William. I just need you to try. William stood there for a moment longer, staring at her, his mind still wrestling with the enormity of what he had just agreed to. Then, with a quiet sigh, he nodded. I'll help. We'll figure it out. The relief that washed over Amelia was almost overwhelming. She hadn't expected him to agree so quickly, but there it was. He was willing to try. And for Bella, that was all that mattered. Amelia's shoulders sagged with the weight of everything that had just happened, but a quiet sense of hope began to replace the tension. I never wanted to involve you, she whispered, looking at William. But now, I don't have a choice. As the camera lingers on her weary face, urging viewers to reflect on the emotional stakes, the message is clear. Sometimes, we all need to step up for the ones we love, even when it's hard. If you've ever been faced with a choice that could change everything, this story is for you. Subscribe now to witness the journey of redemption, hope, and second chances. The weight of Amelia's words pressed down on William as he sat in the oversized leather chair in his office, his gaze unfocused. The photograph of Bella, the daughter he never knew he had, lay on the desk in front of him. He'd barely registered the passing hours as his mind spun, lost in the whirlwind of emotions that had torn through him. A daughter. His daughter. The thought repeated in his head like a constant drumbeat. He could hardly wrap his mind around it. How was he supposed to process this? How could he go from having nothing, no idea about this child, to suddenly being responsible for her future? His fingers traced the edge of the photograph as memories of the past flooded his mind, memories he had long buried beneath layers of ambition and power. He closed his eyes, trying to block out the sound of the city below and focus on the images that played in his head. The night he met Amelia was one he would never forget. They'd been drawn together in a way that felt almost inevitable, her quiet beauty, her soft smile, and the way she seemed to ground him when everything around him felt chaotic. She wasn't like the women who frequented his world, calculating, driven by their own ambitions. Amelia had been real, genuine, and for a brief time, that felt like exactly what he needed. But as their relationship deepened, the cracks began to show. William's obsession with his career, the late nights, the endless meetings, the constant push for more, had taken a toll. He had been consumed by his empire, and in doing so, he had ignored the most important thing, the woman who loved him, the one who was trying to build a life with him. William's fingers tightened around the edges of the photo as the memory of their last conversation resurfaced. The day she left, the day she walked away, carrying more than just her suitcase, she carried the weight of unspoken words and unfinished promises. He could still hear her voice, cold with resignation. "I can't do this anymore, William. You've chosen your work. I can't be a part of that world, and I can't bring a child into it either." At the time, he hadn't understood. He'd been too focused on building his empire, too blind to see that the very thing he was striving for, the success, the power, the money, had driven away the one person who truly mattered. No, that empire felt like a prison. William leaned back in his chair, his hands rubbing his temples as if he could push the weight of his guilt out of his mind. He had spent years telling himself that he was doing it all for the future, for the legacy he could leave behind. But the more he thought about Bella, the more he realized that none of it mattered if he couldn't be the father she needed. He thought about the milestones he had missed, the first steps, her first day of school, the birthday parties he would never attend, all the moments that were supposed to shape a daughter's life, all of it gone because he had been too busy building an empire that would mean nothing if he couldn't be present for the one person who needed him most. Could he really change? Could he put down the phone calls and board meetings, the endless pressure and expectations, and be there for Bella? The idea seemed almost impossible. But the thought of her, alone and at risk of being taken away, his daughter, was unbearable. William stood up, pacing across the office as his mind raced. His life had always been about control. He controlled deals. He controlled his companies, his image. But how could he control something as wild and unpredictable as fatherhood? Could he really step into this role he had never prepared for? Could he fix the mess he had created? He glanced out the window, looking down at the busy streets of Manhattan. The city was alive with movement, with energy, just like the life he had built for himself. But suddenly, it all felt empty. The rush, the constant pursuit of more, none of it seemed to matter when the thing he had always wanted most, family, was slipping through his fingers. A father's job was more than just providing. It was being there. It was showing up, and he had failed before. But this time, he couldn't afford to fail. He walked back to his desk and picked up the photograph again, studying Bella's face. There was a spark in her eyes, something that reminded him of Amelia, a spark of life, of hope. The same hope that had once drawn him to her, the hope he had lost somewhere along the way. Maybe it was too late. Maybe Bella would never see him as a father. Maybe there was too much damage. But then again, maybe, just maybe, he could try. For her, for Amelia, for the family he had failed to see in his pursuit of success. He dropped the photograph back onto the desk with a sigh, his hands shaking slightly. He didn't know how to be a father, but he was going to learn. He had to. William stepped back from the desk, his mind a tangle of emotions. He wasn't sure what the next step would be, or even if he was ready. But for the first time in years, he was willing to try. He was ready to face the consequences of his past and make the future different for Bella's sake. He would make things right. William stood there for a moment, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. He wasn't sure what would happen next, but he knew that the path ahead would be hard. Still, he had to try. Sometimes, life gives you a second chance, and when it does, you can't turn your back on it. If you've ever had to face your own regrets and decide to fight for what matters most, this story is for you. Subscribe now and see what happens when the past collides with the future. The morning was still and quiet, an eerie calm before the storm. William stood by the window of his apartment, staring out at the city that never seemed to stop moving. His reflection in the glass was the only thing that seemed still. He wasn't sure if he was ready for what was coming, but the thought of turning back was unbearable. He had agreed to meet her. His daughter, Bella. But how did you meet someone you'd never known existed? How did you begin to explain yourself, your life, when you had nothing to offer but regrets? Amelia had been on the phone with him earlier that morning, her voice filled with both relief and apprehension. She needs to know, William. She needs to know that you're not just a stranger, she had said. William hadn't answered right away. What could he say? There was no guidebook for this, no instructions. Amelia paced back and forth in the small living room, nervously glancing at the clock on the wall. The moment of truth was approaching, and her heart was in her throat. She had spent the last few days mentally preparing herself, trying to work through the rush of emotions that had taken over her since William had agreed to step into their lives. But how would Bella react? Amelia stopped pacing and looked at her daughter, sitting quietly on the couch. Bella was sketching in her notebook. The only sound in the room was the scratching of her pencil against paper. Amelia sat down beside her, taking a deep breath. "Bella," she said softly, her voice gentle but filled with a quiet urgency. "We need to talk." Bella paused, looking up at her mother. There was something in her eyes, something both innocent and cautious. Amelia had always tried to protect Bella from the hurt of the world, but she knew that protection could only go so far. "Is something wrong?" Bella asked, her voice small, a hint of concern lining her features. Amelia smiled, though it didn't reach her eyes. "No, sweetie, nothing's wrong. But," she hesitated, "there's something important I need to tell you, something I should have told you a long time ago." Bella put her pencil down, setting the notebook aside, and gave her mother her full attention. Amelia could see the uncertainty in her daughter's gaze, the quiet curiosity. Amelia took a breath, steadying herself. "The man I was with when I had you, the one I told you about before. Well, his name is William, and he's your father." Bella blinked, clearly processing the words. Her eyes flicked to the door, then back to her mother, uncertainty clouding her expression. "But why didn't he?" She trailed off, the question hanging in the air. Amelia's heart clenched. "I left him before I could tell him about you. I thought it would be better that way. But I was wrong, Bella. I was wrong not to let him know. And now, well," she paused, taking Bella's hand in hers. "Now he wants to meet you. He wants to be a part of your life." Bella's expression was unreadable, but Amelia saw a flicker of something there. Was it fear? Anger? Confusion? Amelia couldn't tell, but she knew this moment was going to change everything. Amelia gently squeezed Bella's hand. "I know this is a lot to take in, but I want you to be open to it. You deserve to know your father, Bella. You deserve that chance." Bella didn't speak at first. She looked down at her lap, her fingers fidgeting with the fabric of her jeans. Amelia's heart beat loudly in her chest as she waited for her daughter to respond. Finally, Bella spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "What if I don't like him?" The question hung in the air, sharp and raw. Amelia's throat tightened as she tried to answer. "You don't have to like him right away, sweetheart. You don't have to feel anything right away. But you need to give him a chance. We're all trying to figure this out." Bella nodded slowly, but there was still a hesitance in her eyes. Amelia didn't know if it was fear or something else, but she understood. After all these years of living in a world where her father's absence had been a constant shadow, the reality of having him suddenly present had to be overwhelming. Later that afternoon, the doorbell rang. cutting through the quiet of the apartment. Amelia's heart skipped a beat as she glanced at Bella, who had been pacing anxiously for the last few minutes. "Are you ready?" Amelia asked, standing up and smoothing down her blouse. Bella nodded but didn't meet her mother's eyes. Amelia could see the fear there, the uncertainty. William stood outside the door, his posture stiff and uneasy. He had dressed carefully, but nothing could mask the tension in his body. He hadn't known what to expect, hadn't known what to say. Amelia opened the door, her breath catching in her chest as their eyes met. He was here. This was happening. "Hi," William said, his voice low, uncertain. Amelia stepped aside, motioning for him to come in. As he entered, he saw Bella standing off to the side, her arms crossed over her chest. The tension in the room was palpable, and William couldn't help but feel the weight of everything that had led up to this moment. "Hi," Bella said softly, her eyes flicking up at him briefly before looking away. For a long moment, neither of them knew what to say. The silence hung between them, thick and awkward, as they both tried to navigate the enormity of the moment. William cleared his throat, his heart racing in his chest. He paused, then looked at Amelia, as if seeking reassurance. "I'm not sure how to do this, but I want to try." Amelia nodded, her eyes soft. "It's okay," she whispered. "We're all learning." And as the first words were spoken, and the first steps were taken, a fragile bridge began to form between father and daughter, one that would take time to build, but was worth every effort. As Amelia watched William and Bella stand in the same room, unsure yet willing to try, she couldn't help but reflect on how hard it was to face the past. But sometimes, the hardest things bring the greatest rewards. If you've ever had to face an uncertain future, this story is for you. Subscribe to witness the journey of rebuilding a family, one step at a time. The days blurred together as Amelia and William worked tirelessly to prepare for what seemed like an insurmountable challenge, proving that William could be a stable father figure for Bella. The clock was ticking, and every decision, every move they made, felt like it could tip the scale. Amelia sat at the small kitchen table, papers scattered in front of her, her head resting in her hands. The weight of the situation felt heavier with every passing hour. The future of her daughter, the life she had fought so hard to protect, was now in the hands of strangers, the same strangers who could take Bella away with a single decision. William was pacing in the living room, the tension between them palpable. He had promised to help, promised to step up, but the reality of the situation was far more complicated than he had imagined. His mind raced as he thought about the legal hurdles they had to overcome. He was trying to be a father to a daughter he had never known, but the legal system, with its cold, unforgiving procedures, was not on their side. A knock on the door broke the silence, and Amelia's heart skipped a beat. She stood up quickly, trying to shake off the anxiety that had been building in her chest. As she opened the door, she was greeted by the sharp, professional face of a woman in a dark suit, holding a folder in her hands. "Miss Collins?" The woman's voice was businesslike, but there was something almost condescending in her tone. "I'm Jennifer Brown, the social worker assigned to Bella's case." Amelia nodded, stepping aside to let her in. "Thank you for coming," she said, though her voice trembled. Jennifer's gaze flicked over to William, who had stopped pacing, his expression unreadable. Amelia noticed the slight tension in his shoulders, the way he instinctively straightened as if trying to assert control over the situation. The woman didn't offer him a handshake, instead glancing at the papers in her hands before speaking again. "I've been reviewing Bella's case," Jennifer continued, "and I'm concerned about her living situation. I understand that William Morrison is now involved, but I have to be honest, I'm not convinced that he's ready to take on the responsibility of fatherhood." The words hit Amelia like a slap, and she instinctively moved to defend him. "William is trying, Jennifer. He's committed to being there for Bella." Jennifer's gaze sharpened. "Commitment isn't enough. Bella needs stability, routine, a secure environment. And while Mr. Morrison may have money, he lacks the history of being a part of her life." Her eyes flicked over to William, who stood there, his face hardening. "You've been absent for 16 years, Mr. Morrison." You don't just walk into a child's life and expect things to fall into place. The words stung. William clenched his fists, his jaw tightening. Amelia saw the anger flash in his eyes, but she also saw the vulnerability that was just beneath the surface, his fear of failing, of not being enough. "Amelia," he began, his voice rough, "I am trying. I know I missed so much, but I can't fix the past. I'm here now. I'm willing to do whatever it takes." Jennifer's gaze softened just a fraction, but her tone remained firm. "It's not just about what you're willing to do, Mr. Morrison. It's about what Bella needs. And right now, I'm not sure she can rely on you." Amelia felt her heart drop. Jennifer's words were like ice water, chilling her optimism. She had hoped that, with William's help, they could create a new future for Bella. But now, with the social worker's doubts hanging in the air, everything felt uncertain again. "Amelia, we've got to be careful," William said, his voice low. "The court. They'll see my absence. They'll see a man who's been living a different life for years." She nodded slowly, the reality of their situation settling heavily on her shoulders. "I know, but we can't give up. We can't let them take her away." Jennifer glanced at the papers again, then stood up. "I'll be in touch. We'll schedule an official evaluation soon." She turned to William. "I suggest you prepare yourself. This will be a much harder process than you think." As the door closed behind her, the weight of the situation crashed down on them. Amelia looked at William, who was now standing by the window, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. She could see the storm of emotions brewing inside him: fear, guilt, frustration. "I'm not sure I can do this," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Amelia's heart twisted. "You are doing this, William. You're already here. That's more than we had before." She stood up, moving toward him. "We don't know how this will turn out, but we're in it together, and we have to keep fighting for Bella." William didn't say anything for a long time, but finally he nodded, though his expression was still filled with uncertainty. "I'm not perfect, but I'll try. I won't walk away from this." Amelia's heart swelled with a mix of hope and fear. She knew they were far from having everything figured out, but for the first time she felt like there was a chance. A chance for Bella, a chance for them, and maybe, just maybe, a chance for redemption. In the quiet of the room, as the reality of the legal battle set in, Amelia couldn't help but wonder if they could truly overcome the odds. But sometimes, you don't get a second chance unless you're willing to fight for it. You can never turn back time. But what if you had a second chance? William had chosen to fight, and so had Amelia. Now it was time to see if they could truly make it work. Subscribe to watch the next chapter of their journey, one filled with uncertainty, hope, and the courage to fight for what matters most. The apartment was quiet, the usual hum of the city outside, muted by the weight of the moment. William stood in the doorway of Bella's room, unsure of how to proceed. He had promised to be there for her, but this was territory he had never navigated before. Being the father was nothing like running a company. There were no spreadsheets, no deadlines, no clear path to follow. Bella sat at her desk, her head bent over a pile of schoolwork. She was quiet, the room filled only by the soft scratching of her pencil against paper. She didn't even look up when William entered. "Hey," William said, his voice tentative, unsure of how to start. Bella glanced up briefly, offering a quick nod before returning her attention to her assignment. William stood in the doorway for a moment longer, feeling like an outsider in a world he didn't belong to. "How's the project going?" he asked, trying to keep his voice casual. Bella sighed, a small frown tugging at her lips. "It's fine," she muttered, not sounding very convinced. William stepped closer, glancing at the stack of books and papers on her desk. It was a history project, something about ancient civilizations. He could barely remember the last time he had done a school project himself. His life had been too busy, too focused on the next big deal, the next meeting. But Bella needed him to be more than just a distant figure in her life. She needed someone who would show up, even for something as small as this. "Need any help?" he asked, offering her a tentative smile. Bella looked at him for the first time, her eyes narrowing slightly. She didn't answer immediately. her expression still guarded. For a long moment, William wondered if he had overstepped, if she was still too angry, too hurt to even consider letting him in. But then, to his surprise, she nodded. "Well, I don't really get the part about the ancient Greeks," she said quietly, her voice almost shy. "I'm supposed to write about their government system, but it's confusing." William felt a flicker of hope. This was something. This was a chance to connect, to show her that he was here, that he cared enough to try. "Okay," he said, pulling up a chair next to her desk. "Let's figure this out together." As he sat down beside her, he noticed how tense she still was. Her shoulders were stiff, her posture stiffened with the same guardedness he had seen when they first met. But there was something in her eyes, something that said she was willing to at least try. That small opening gave him the courage to lean in and help her work through the project, step by step. They spent the next half hour talking about the Greeks, their democracy, and the way their government was structured. For a brief moment, William felt like a normal father, sitting with his daughter and helping her with her homework, nothing more, nothing less. As the conversation shifted from ancient history to more personal matters, Bella hesitated. She set her pencil down and looked at him, her expression softening just slightly. "You don't have to keep helping, you know," she said, the words cautious, as if she were testing him. "I'm used to doing things on my own." William looked at her, seeing the pain behind the wall she had built. "I know you are," he said quietly, "but I want to help. I know I can't change everything, but I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere." There it was again, the weight of his own failure. He had spent so many years thinking about the wrong things, chasing success in a world that didn't matter. But in that moment, with Bella sitting next to him, he understood what mattered. Bella didn't respond immediately. Instead, she simply nodded, her lips pressed together as if she was still figuring him out. It wasn't much, but it was a start, a small breakthrough, a crack in the walls she had built around herself. Meanwhile, Amelia stood in the kitchen, watching the scene unfold from the doorway. She could see the tentative progress between them, the small moments where William seemed to be stepping into a role he never thought he would play. But there was still so much uncertainty. For every inch they gained, they still had miles to go. She was cautiously hopeful, but the fear of it all falling apart was never far from her mind. She had watched William struggle, watched him try and fail, and she couldn't help but wonder, was this enough? Could they really rebuild the broken pieces of their lives for Bella's sake? As she watched them, her heart swelled with a mix of hope and doubt. Maybe this time it would be different. Maybe, just maybe, they could make it work. But there were no guarantees. She couldn't protect Bella from every disappointment, from every heartbreak, and the fact that William was trying, that he was here, meant the world to her. But Amelia still had to face the reality. Could they rebuild everything? Or was this just another failed attempt? William finished helping Bella with her project, his heart still racing from the rare moment of connection. As he stood up to leave, Bella spoke again. "Thanks," she said softly, barely above a whisper. He paused at the door, turning back to look at her. "You're welcome." For the first time, the words felt like more than just a polite exchange. They felt like a beginning, a start to something that could maybe, just maybe, turn into a real father-daughter relationship. As he left the room, William's mind was still spinning. Could he really do this? Could he be the father Bella needed? There was so much to prove, so much to make up for, but for the first time, he felt like he might be on the right path. William stood in the hallway, looking back at the closed door of Bella's room. The journey had only just begun, and he knew there would be challenges ahead. But one thing was clear. He wasn't backing down. Sometimes, the hardest thing you can do is show up, to try, to make a difference when it feels like it's too late. If you've ever fought for a second chance, or tried to rebuild what was broken, this story is for you. Subscribe to see how far William and Amelia are willing to go for their family and whether they can make it work. The apartment was quiet, but the tension in the air was palpable. William and Amelia sat across from each other in the living room, a space that had once been filled with laughter, love, and hope. Now, it felt more like a battlefield, one that neither of them had asked to fight. But here they were, forced to face the demons of their past, ones that had torn them apart all those years ago. William's eyes flicked to the space between them. He had never felt more distant from Amelia, not even when they were separated. This was the moment, the one they both had avoided for so long, the moment when they would have to confront the truth about their failed relationship. "I don't even know where to start," William said, his voice heavy with regret. He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "All I've ever done is chase success. And I thought if I just worked harder, everything else would fall into place. I thought you'd understand." Amelia's gaze softened, but the hurt was still there, buried deep beneath the surface. She had spent so many years trying to block out the pain of that time, but it was all rushing back now. The betrayal, the loneliness, the feeling that she was just one of the many things in William's life that came second. "You never saw me, William," she said quietly, her voice trembling slightly. "You never saw what I needed, what we times needed. You were always so focused on your empire, on building something bigger than yourself, that you forgot about us. You forgot about me. You forgot about Bella." The words hit him like a punch. He could see it in her eyes, the years of anger, of pain, building up and finally spilling over. And he knew she was right. He had been selfish. He had been so consumed by his ambition that he had failed the person who mattered most to him. William could still remember the night it all fell apart. They had been sitting at the kitchen table, the silence between them growing heavier with every passing second. Amelia had been distant for weeks, her patience wearing thin. "Do you even care anymore?" she had asked, her voice quiet but cutting. "Do you even see how much I've been carrying, William? How much I've sacrificed for you? For this life you've built?" He had looked at her, confused. "What are you talking about? We have everything we ever wanted. I'm doing this for us, for our future." But Amelia had only shaken her head, her eyes filled with tears. "You don't get it. We are your future, but I'm not a part of it anymore. You're here, but you're not really here. And I can't keep pretending that everything's okay when it's not. I need more than this, William. I need you. And you're too busy chasing something that will never fill the empty space inside you." That was the moment she had left. The memory stung. William's chest tightened as he remembered how she had packed her things, how she had walked out the door without looking back. He had tried to chase her down, tried to fix things. But it was too late. The damage had been done. "I didn't know how to be the man you needed," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I thought I was doing everything right. I thought if I just provided, if I just gave you everything you wanted, I could fix it all. But I didn't realize that I was losing you in the process." Amelia's eyes filled with tears, but she quickly wiped them away. "I wanted you, William. Not the empire, not the business. I wanted you, the man I fell in love with, but you were never there. You were always somewhere else, somewhere I couldn't reach." A heavy silence settled between them, the weight of everything that had been left unsaid, everything that had festered for so long, was now sitting in the room with them. Amelia could feel the old wounds reopening, but this time she wasn't running. This time she was confronting it. "I was so scared," Amelia said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Scared that if I let you back in, you'd hurt me again, that I'd be left alone again. And I couldn't do that. I couldn't risk my heart. Risk times her, times heart." William's eyes softened. He hadn't known. He hadn't realized how deep the fear ran for her. "Amelia, I never meant to hurt you. I never wanted to make you feel alone. But I understand now. I see it now. I was so caught up in my own world that I couldn't see what I was doing to you, to us." Amelia took a deep breath, her hands shaking slightly. "But it's not just about the past. We can't change what happened, William. I can't change it. And I don't know if I can ever forgive you for everything, for leaving me, for leaving Bella. But right now, we have to focus on her. We have to do this for Bella." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. William's mind was a whirlwind of regrets and realizations. The man he had become was not the man he had once promised to be for Amelia, for Bella, but in this moment, he had a chance to change that. He looked at Amelia, his voice raw with emotion. "I'm sorry. I can't undo the past, but I'll do everything I can to be the man you need me to be now. For Bella. For you." Amelia met his gaze, her heart still guarded but hopeful. "We're both broken, William, but maybe we can rebuild together. For her sake, we can't change the past, but we can choose what happens next." And for the first time, in the quiet space between them, there was a glimmer of understanding. They had both made mistakes, they had both hurt each other, but in this moment, they were both willing to try. It wasn't perfect. It would never be perfect, but it was a start. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. We all have parts of our past we'd rather forget, but sometimes, facing those dark moments is the only way to heal. If you've ever had to confront your own mistakes or rebuild something that was once broken, this story is for you. Subscribe now to watch how William and Amelia take their first step toward redemption together. The courtroom was tense, the air thick with anticipation. Amelia sat next to William, her fingers tightly gripping the edge of her seat as the judge reviewed the case details. Everything was on the line now: Bella's future, their ability to prove William's readiness as a father, and the fragile hope they had been building for weeks. It had been a long, exhausting road. The constant meetings, the late-night discussions, the awkward moments between her and William as they navigated this new, uncertain version of their relationship. And yet, in the middle of all the chaos, a strange thing had begun to happen. They were starting to work as a team. William, once distant and consumed by his work, was now showing up not just in court, but in every small moment with Bella. They were starting to forge a bond. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't fast, but there was something there, a small flicker of trust, a quiet understanding that they were both in this together. William had spent hours with Bella, helping her with a school project. It had started off awkwardly, just like every other attempt at connecting had, but this time, something shifted. Bella had looked up at him with a soft smile, her eyes not as guarded as they had been before. "Thanks for helping me with the project," she had said, her voice shy but sincere. "I think I actually get it now." William's heart had swelled at the simple words. He didn't know how to be a father, he still didn't, but in that moment he knew he was doing something right. And that small moment of connection had meant more than all the power and success he had ever achieved in his corporate world. Amelia glanced over at William, who was leaning forward, his brow furrowed as he focused on the proceedings. There was still so much doubt in her mind. She had never fully believed they could pull this off, never fully believed that the court would hand them the future they wanted. But something had shifted in the last few days. They had started to see each other in a new light, not as the people who had failed each other years ago, but as a father and a mother fighting for their child. The lawyer representing them stood up, addressing the judge with confidence, presenting the evidence of William's commitment to becoming an active part of Bella's life. Amelia felt a flicker of hope, a slight lift in her chest. Maybe, just maybe, they were getting through this. The opposing lawyer, however, was still trying to make their case, pushing that William's past neglect would make it impossible for him to be a stable figure for Bella. The stakes felt higher than ever. But Amelia couldn't help but feel like they were finally gaining ground. As the judge deliberated, William leaned over and whispered to her, "I know I've made mistakes, but I'll never stop trying for her, Amelia. I'm here. I'm all in." Her heart swelled with a mixture of relief and doubt. Could this really be happening? Could they really rebuild everything? But in that moment, with William's words echoing in her mind, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, this family could heal. The judge's gavel echoed through the room, and for a moment, everything went silent. Amelia held her breath, not daring to move. The decision was finally here. "The court has reviewed the case," the judge said, his voice calm but firm. "And while there are still concerns regarding the stability of the family dynamic, we are granting Mr. Morrison temporary custody of his daughter, pending further evaluations." Amelia blinked in disbelief. Temporary custody. It was a victory, but it was only the beginning. The fight wasn't over yet. But as she looked at William, his face a mixture of relief and disbelief, she felt a surge of hope she hadn't allowed herself to feel in so long. "We've got a chance," William murmured to her, his voice thick with emotion. "A real chance." Amelia nodded, her heart still racing. They had won a small victory, but the path ahead was still uncertain. They had only just begun to rebuild, and there were many more hurdles to clear. Back at the apartment, the weight of the court's decision still hung in the air. William sat down on the couch, his hand resting on his knee as he stared at the floor, lost in thought. Bella was in her room, probably processing everything that had happened. The news had been a shock to her, but there was something different in the way she had looked at William when the judge had ruled in their favor. Something softer, something that resembled trust. Amelia sat beside him, her voice hesitant but filled with quiet optimism. "We're not there yet," she said, her hand finding his. "But we're getting closer, and we'll do it together, William. For her. For us." William squeezed her hand, the weight of everything still pressing down on him. "I'm scared, Amelia. I'm scared that I'm not enough, that I'll fail again." "You won't," she said softly, her voice steady. "We'll keep trying. We'll keep showing up, one step at a time." And as they sat there, hands clasped together, there was a moment of quiet understanding between them. The journey was far from over, but for the first time they could see a path forward, a path where they weren't just surviving, but growing together. As the weight of the decision sank in, they both realized something: they had a second chance. They were willing to fight for it, to keep moving forward despite the obstacles. It's not just about the past, it's about the future. Will you be there when it matters most? As William and Amelia step into this new chapter, join them as they continue their fight for family, redemption, and a future worth fighting for. Subscribe to witness the journey one step at a time. The courtroom was empty, the echoes of the judge's final words still lingering in the air. Amelia sat at the edge of the bench, her hands trembling slightly as she tried to absorb the significance of what had just happened. William sat beside her, his usually controlled demeanor broken, his eyes focused straight ahead, his mind clearly racing. Bella, sitting between them, had her arms folded, her gaze downcast. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind, a battle they hadn't been sure they could win. But now it was over. The judge had ruled in their favor. Bella was staying with them. For a long moment, none of them spoke. The weight of everything, the years of separation, the mistakes, the heartbreak hung in the air like a fog, thick and suffocating. But there was something else too, a fragile thread of hope, a sense of relief, a realization that, despite the odds, they had made it. Together. Amelia's breath caught as she looked at Bella. Her daughter, her beautiful, strong daughter, was still trying to process the events that had unfolded, the court case, the lawyer's words, the new reality. It was a lot for a young girl to carry. But the victory was theirs. Theirs, not just hers. It had taken everything they had, every ounce of strength, and more than a few missteps. But they had done it. And now, it was time to rebuild. The apartment was quieter now, the weight of the court's decision still settling in. They had all been so busy fighting for Bella's future that they hadn't stopped to think about what would come next. William stood in the kitchen, looking at the ingredients for dinner laid out in front of him. Amelia had offered to cook, but he had insisted on doing it himself. Maybe it was a small gesture, but it felt important to him. He had spent so many years focusing on everything except family. Maybe cooking dinner wasn't going to change everything, but it was a start. It was his way of showing up. Amelia entered the kitchen, leaning against the doorframe and watching him for a moment. "You know, this might be the first time I've seen you in here," she said with a soft smile, her voice filled with a quiet warmth. William paused, looking up at her. "I'm not exactly a master chef, but I thought it was time I learned." Amelia's smile widened, but there was still a flicker of hesitation in her eyes. It wasn't that she doubted his intentions, she didn't, but the road ahead was still long, and old wounds hadn't healed entirely. Still, This was something. It wasn't perfect, but it was a step. Bella walked into the room then, standing just behind Amelia, her hands still shoved into the pockets of her hoodie. "What's for dinner?" she asked, her voice flat, though there was a hint of curiosity behind it. William turned, giving her a small, tentative smile. "I don't know yet, but I'm hoping you'll like it." Bella didn't respond right away. Instead, she walked over to the counter, eyeing the ingredients with suspicion. Amelia could feel the tension in the air, the uncertainty still hanging over them all. But there was something in the way Bella glanced at William, something softer, something different. "Okay, I'll try it," she said after a long pause, her voice a little less guarded. William's heart swelled at the words, small as they were, but in this moment they meant everything. Dinner was simple, nothing fancy. But it didn't matter. They sat together at the table, eating in relative silence at first, each person still adjusting to this new version of their family. William kept glancing at Bella, trying to gauge how she was feeling, how this moment felt for her. She wasn't smiling, but she wasn't pulling away either. After a few minutes, Amelia broke the silence. "You know, she said, her voice thoughtful. "I never imagined we'd be here, William. I never thought we'd get to this point. After everything that happened, I never thought I'd be sitting at a table like this with you again." William looked at her, his expression filled with regret and a quiet determination. "Neither did I. I've spent so many years thinking about what I wanted, what I needed, but I see now more than I ever did that it was never about me. It was about us. It's about being there for Bella, and being there for you." Bella looked up from her plate then, her gaze flickering between her parents. For the first time in what felt like forever, she met William's eyes, her expression less guarded, more open. I guess I can try," she said quietly, her voice unsure but soft, the words hanging in the air like the start of something new. William's heart stopped for a moment, and Amelia's breath caught. It was a small step, but it was a step in the right direction. For the first time, they could see a path forward. They were still a family in the making, still healing, still figuring out how to move forward. But it wasn't too late. It was never too late to rebuild. Amelia stood by the window, staring out at the city lights, her mind racing. The victory in court had been a turning point, but it was just the beginning. She could feel the weight of the future pressing down on her, but for the first time in years, there was a spark of hope. William joined her, standing by her side. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there with her, both of them lost in their own thoughts. But then, quietly, he spoke. "I know I can't make up for the past, but I'll do everything I can for her, for both of you." Amelia turned to him, her eyes soft, filled with the quiet understanding that had been missing for so long. "I know," she whispered, the weight of everything that had come before slipping away, if only for a moment. As they stood there together, looking out at the city they had once dreamed of conquering alone, they realized something. They had been through the worst of it, and while the road ahead wasn't clear, the future wasn't as uncertain as it once seemed. They had a chance. They had each other. A second chance isn't just about fixing what's broken, it's about building something new from the ground up. William, Amelia, and Bella are taking those first steps toward healing, and there's still so much to fight for. Subscribe now to see how their journey continues one step at a time. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out, and do well to click on the subscribe button and turn on notifications for the next story.